in both the partial equilibrium analysis and general equilibrium analysis of tariff, we can conclude one thing, that if we consider sector Y protected through tariff, so that will have two impacts. Number one, the domestic production of the protected sector, that will definitely increase, and as the domestic production of protected sector increases, that will definitely reduce the volume of import. So protection in the form of tariff will increase the domestic production of the protected in the sector, and it will reduce the import of that commodity. Now, what is prohibitive tariff? Prohibitive tariff means that is a rate of tariff at which there will be no import will become zero. So that's why we call it prohibitive tariff. It completely prohibits the import of the commodity, and in the other words we can say that the domestic import competing sector is completely protected. So again we can prove the protective tariff. We can show the case of protective tariff both in terms of partial equilibrium analysis and also general equilibrium analysis. So first we will start with the partial equilibrium analysis. In vertical axis we are measuring price, and horizontal axis we are measuring quantity. So this is my demand curve D. This is my supply curve, and P0 is the international price of the product. So in this case we see that if there is no flow from international market, the domestic market would clear at price P1. But here the country is a price taker and there is free trade from the foreign market. The commodity is being sold at OP0. So at this price, domestic sellers have to accept this price, and domestic supply will be OQ1, domestic demand will be OQ2. So Q1, Q2 will be the volume of import. Now, if the government wants to protect the domestic import competing sector by imposing tariff, what the government will do? Government will, let us consider, is imposing a per unit of tariff. So domestic producers can charge P0 plus T. So in simple words, now domestic producers are allowed to charge higher price for their product. So if they are allowed to charge higher price, domestic supply will also rise. The domestic producers will supply more. On the other hand, due to increase in tariff, increase in the price of the commodity in domestic market, what will happen? There will be a decline in demand, because we know that there is inverse relationship between price and demand. So now, if the tariff, what is the market clearing price here? OP1. So if the price of the commodity is OP1, then there will be no need to import the product in the market, because at OP1 we can see the demand and supply will be exactly equal to OQ3. So initially price is OP0. So if we domestic market, the producers can charge, the domestic market price is OP1. automatically the volume of trade will be 0. So here in this case, what will be the protective tariff? The protective tariff will be exactly equal to the distance P1, P0. If tariff is imposed, if we see that OP0 plus T equals to OP1, that means this tariff indicates no trade of product. That means the volume of import will be completely 0 because domestic supply will be sufficient to fulfill the domestic demand. So here in this case, P0, P1 is the difference between OP0 and OP1, that is the protective tariff. Now we will show it in the case of general equilibrium analysis. So now we will consider the prohibitive tariff in a general equilibrium analysis. So this is my AB is my production possibilities curve. PA is my I0 is the community indifference curve, E0 is the domestic production and consumption point under autarky. So slope of PA equals to PX by PY under autarky. So let us consider international terms of trade is Px by Py, which is greater than Px by Py under autarky. So this country enjoys comparative advantage on X, so it will export X and import Y. So let us consider that. Let us consider that PI is the international terms of trade. The slope of PI represents international terms of trade. So PI is the post-trade production point of the country, and this straight line PI will become consumption possibility locus after trade, and post-trade equilibrium, consumption equilibrium point will be 1. So we can see this is the import of Y and this is the export of X. Now let us consider to protect domestic industry. To protect the domestic industry, the country is imposing tariff. So due to imposition of tariff, in domestic market there is a discrepancy between domestic price and international price of Y. But due to imposition of tariff, the international price of Y will start to increase. And it will be the internal to the country, to this market, the international terms of trade becomes Px by Py plus T. The price of Y is increasing. So what we will see? We will see that this curve will start to become flatter. What will be the prohibitive tariff? Whenever we will reach the prohibitive tariff, then there will be no difference between the straight lines. Which difference? That means that time slope of PA and PI will gradually become flatter and it will coincide to PA. So whenever we will find that due to imposition of tariff, if we see Px by Py in international market, or in other words, better to say in this way, that Px by Py plus T is exactly equal to Px by Py under autarky. So that time the PI will completely coincide to PA. So international price post tariff international price ratio and domestic autarky price ratio will become equal. The trade will be zero. Country will be brought back to its previous level of equilibrium. That means autarkic, there will be no difference between post-trade equilibrium and autarkic equilibrium. So this type of tariff is known as prohibitive tariff, for which import becomes zero.